Sergeant Mia Reed had perfected the art of being invisible. At 32, she moved through the military base like a ghost, her chestnut hair always pulled back in a regulation bun so tight it seemed to stretch her amber eyes. Her petite 5'4" frame was often overlooked in crowds of towering soldiers, her voice soft as a whisper, barely carrying across the cavernous equipment warehouses where disarmed explosives and specialized tools sat like sleeping giants. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Most people at Fort Benning knew her as that equipment girl. The one who spent her days meticulously organizing demolition kits and securing precision tools with obsessive accuracy. While other EOD specialists used standard military tablets, Mia carried an old brown leather notebook, documenting every detail of her inspections in careful handwritten notes. "There goes the equipment goddess," Staff Sergeant Jake Rodriguez would say with a smirk as Mia passed their table in the mess hall. The nickname always carried more sarcasm than respect, and the laughter that followed made Mia's shoulders tense just slightly. She'd learned to eat alone in the far corner, a worn notebook open beside her tray, reviewing equipment manifests while others socialized. What her colleagues didn't know, what nobody bothered to ask about, was the small faded canvas bag strapped to her right hip. Inside lay a set of custom titanium micro-tools with hand-polished handles, relics from another life that seemed as distant as a half-remembered dream. The tools had saved countless lives more times than she could count, but now they felt like carrying ghosts. During mission briefings, Mia would sit in the back row, her detailed observations about equipment maintenance and precision calibration falling on deaf ears. Colonel Davidson, the base commander, had a habit of talking over her whenever she tried to contribute. "Reed, just stick to what you know," he'd say dismissively. "Leave the tactical planning to the real officers." The words stung, but Mia had learned to swallow her pride. She knew every micro-tool specification, every wire cutter tensile strength, every square inch of those bomb disposal kits better than the maintenance crews. She understood advanced circuitry and complex explosive compounds better than specialists, with twice her rank and 3 times her pay. But in their eyes, she was just the quiet one who stayed in the equipment room, organizing everyone else's tools without complaint. What they didn't know was that Mia Reed wasn't just another equipment specialist. 2 years ago, she had been Captain Mia Reed, Special Forces EOD Division, an elite bomb disposal expert with over 200 confirmed disarmaments and 3 combat tours across 4 continents. She had voluntarily requested the transfer to equipment management, not because she couldn't handle the pressure, but because she was emotionally exhausted from facing death daily. "Reed, you're the best EOD tech we've ever trained," her former team leader, Major Thomas Mitchell, had pleaded. "Why throw away that incredible talent?" "I'm not throwing anything away, sir," she had replied quietly. "I'm just choosing more carefully when to use it." For 2 years, she had found genuine peace in the routine work. Organizing equipment containers, checking calibration settings, making sure critical tools and disposal kits reached soldiers who desperately needed them. She discovered deep fulfillment in knowing her meticulous attention to detail kept disposal teams functioning perfectly. But she never forgot her training. Every morning, she still practiced her breathing exercises. Every evening, she still cleaned and maintained her micro-tools, muscle memory guiding her hands through the familiar motions. Because somewhere deep down, she always knew that someday, someone might desperately need those particular skills again. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The base buzzed with the usual morning activity as Mia made her way to Warehouse 3. Today's mission seemed routine: inventory critical equipment and prepare 17 disposal kits for the upcoming training exercise. The EOD training facility, with over 1,000 successful exercises logged, sat waiting like a reliable old friend as she approached the equipment lockers. As she approached the warehouse, Mia noticed the equipment storage area packed impossibly tight. Her trained eye immediately spotted potential issues: tool distribution that could become problematic during rapid deployment, calibration points that would need verification for the training scenario. "Reed!" Colonel Davidson's voice cut through the warehouse noise. "Quit your obsessing and get that inventory signed. We're starting the exercise in 30. Mia looked up from her calculations, a knot forming in her stomach. The weight distribution was off by nearly 200 grams in the precision toolkits. In a training scenario, it wouldn't matter, but if these kits were deployed to a real situation, those extra grams could throw off the delicate balance needed for the most sensitive operations. Sir, I need to recommend some adjustments to the equipment organization. The weight distribution in the micro toolkits could create stability issues if… Reed, Davidson's voice carried a warning. I said sign the inventory. The training team continued their preparations, but Mia caught the eye of Technical Sergeant David Chen, the training coordinator. He'd been watching the exchange with a frown, and she saw him glance at her notebook with genuine interest. At least someone was paying attention. Yes, sir, Mia replied, her voice steady despite the growing unease in her chest. She signed the inventory with a shaking hand, then returned to her final inspection. As she secured the last precision screwdriver, she couldn't shake the feeling that today would be different. The familiar weight of the micro-tool pouch against her hip felt heavier somehow, as if the old tool sensed what was coming. In 3 hours, they would be conducting a high-stakes training exercise with 17 trainees and a warehouse full of precision equipment. And Mia Reed, the invisible equipment sergeant, would discover that some ghosts from the past refused to stay buried. The training facility hummed with anticipation as instructors prepared the exercise scenarios. Mia had strapped herself into the observer's station along the warehouse's east wall, her leather notebook balanced on her knees as she reviewed the inventory one final time. The calibration settings still bothered her. Those extra grams in the micro toolkits created an imbalance that would throw off the trainees' precision work. Everything set back there, Reed? Called out Technical Sergeant David Chen from the instructor station. Unlike the others, Chen had always treated her with professional respect. He was one of the few who understood that equipment management was as much science as art. Affirmative, Mia replied. Though her eyes remained fixed on her calculations, the numbers didn't lie. They were providing toolkits with a 7.3% deviation from optimal calibration, with insufficient counterbalance in the secondary components. She'd seen similar configurations lead to catastrophic handling problems during her previous life in Special Forces. 30 minutes into the exercise, the intercom crackled to life. All personnel, this is Major Williams. We're tracking some unusual readings from Training Scenario 6. The dummy device is showing unexpected signal patterns. Keep a close eye on your monitors. Mia felt her stomach drop. She unbuckled her observer harness and made her way toward the control room, her notebook clutched tightly in her hand. The training facility's slight anomaly was already becoming noticeable, a subtle but dangerous shift that would amplify once the trainees began working on the more complex scenarios. Major Williams, she said as she reached the control room doorway, I need to speak with you about the equipment calibration. We're significantly off standard, and if the trainees attempt the complex disarming scenarios, Reed, get back to your station. Colonel Davidson's voice cut through the room from his observer seat. The instructors don't need an equipment jockey telling them how to run their training. Major Williams, a seasoned EOD expert with kind eyes and graying temples, glanced back at Mia with interest. What's your concern, Sergeant? The micro toolkits are calibrated with a 7.3% deviation from standard, Mia said quickly, sensing Davidson's growing irritation. I ran the calculations 3 times. If the trainees attempt the precision wire-cutting exercise, the calibration error could cause them to apply incorrect pressure, especially with the cross-tension between the sensing elements. Reed, you're an equipment specialist, not an EOD technician, Davidson snapped. Your job is to organize tools and maintain inventory, not question training operations. Sir, I understand, Major Williams said diplomatically. But we're already committed to this exercise timeline. The readings look manageable, and we've worked with non-standard equipment before. Mia felt the familiar sting of dismissal, but something in the Major's tone suggested he was taking her concerns more seriously than Davidson. She nodded and returned to her station, but not before catching Technical Sergeant Chen's eye. He'd been listening to the exchange, and she saw recognition in his expression. He understood the physics as well as she did. As the exercise continued its build-up, Chen made his way back to her position. You've got a point about the calibration, he said quietly, settling into the observer seat beside her. I noticed it during preparation, but Davidson was pushing for an on-time start. "It's not just about being on time," Mia replied, her voice barely audible over the facility noise. "I've seen what happens when microtools are miscalibrated in high-pressure scenarios. The precision becomes unpredictable." Chen studied her face with new interest. "You sound like you've got more experience than most equipment specialists." Mia looked down at her notebook, her fingers unconsciously tracing the worn leather cover. "I've been around EOD operations for a while. How long?" "Long enough to know when something's wrong." The conversation was interrupted by a sudden announcement from the control room. "All personnel, this is Major Williams. We're implementing a scenario change due to unexpected readings from the training devices. Our new exercise incorporates some potentially challenging elements, but it's the best option given the current equipment status." Mia felt her blood run cold. Complex scenarios combined with their current calibration issues could lead to serious training accidents. She looked at Chen, who was already reaching for his radio. "How complex?" Chen called toward the control room. "Level 4 complexity, possibly escalating to level 5, came the reply. "Everyone secure your stations." As if triggered by the Major's words, a warning light suddenly flashed red across the facility monitors. The main training scenario was showing unexpected signal patterns. Warning: anomalous readings detected in Training Scenario 6. The automated system announced, "Potential live device detected. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill." "That's impossible," Chen muttered, staring at his monitor. "All training devices are inert." Mia moved to the nearest station, studying the readouts with practiced precision. What she saw made her heart rate increase. The signature wasn't from a training device at all. It was from an actual explosive mechanism, somehow smuggled into the training area. "Chen," she called out, her voice carrying a new edge of urgency. "Those aren't test readings on Scenario 6. That's a live explosive signature." The technical sergeant followed her gaze to the monitor, and his face went pale. "Sweet Jesus, is that what I think it is?" "Confirmed," Mia said, her voice dropping to the calm, measured tone she'd used in combat situations years ago. "That's a live device with a multi-stage detonator, and it's been activated. All personnel, evacuate immediately. Major Williams." Voice came through the intercom, tight with controlled panic. "This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill. We have detected what appears to be an unauthorized explosive device in Training Base 6. Mia felt the familiar surge of adrenaline, the same biochemical response that had kept her alive through 3 combat tours. Her senses sharpened, her breathing steadied, and her mind began calculating distances, angles, and probabilities with the precision of a targeting computer. The equipment specialist was about to disappear, and Captain Mia Reed was about to wake up from her 2-year slumber. The facility erupted into controlled chaos as personnel followed emergency evacuation protocols. Trainees were being directed to the nearest exits while security teams established a perimeter around the affected area. Through the observation window, Mia could see the training device in Bay 6, its case open, revealing what should have been an inert training mock-up, but was now clearly showing the distinctive wiring pattern of a genuine explosive device. "All personnel, this is Major Williams." The intercom crackled with static and tension. "EOD team is 15 minutes out. Security perimeter is being established. All non-essential personnel must evacuate immediately." In the control room, Colonel Davidson was barking orders into his radio, trying to coordinate with base security. "This is Colonel Davidson. We need immediate bomb disposal support. Repeat, we have a confirmed explosive device in the training facility." Technical Sergeant Chen was fighting to maintain calm among the evacuation, directing trainees toward the designated safety areas. "Everyone stay calm and move quickly. Follow the emergency lighting to the evacuation points." But Mia wasn't listening. Her attention was focused entirely on the tactical situation developing inside Training Base 6. She could see the device clearly now through the observation window. A sophisticated multi-stage explosive with a digital timer display counting down from 15 minutes. This wasn't some amateur threat. This was professional-grade explosives crafted by someone with advanced training. "Chen," she called out, her voice carrying a strange new authority. Get everyone clear of the east wing and establish a wider perimeter. This isn't a simple device. What? Reed, we need to evacuate. Now. The command came out with such force that Chen stopped what he was doing and stared at her for a moment. The quiet equipment specialist was gone, replaced by someone who clearly knew how to take charge in a crisis. Through the intercom, they heard Major Williams again, but this time his voice was strained with barely controlled panic. Update: EOD response team is delayed. Base security reports roadblocks on main access routes. Revised ETA is 25 minutes. Mia felt her heart racing as the situation spiraled beyond control. The timer on the device read 14:23 and counting down. 25 minutes was too long. They had less than 15 before detonation. Reed! Chen grabbed her arm. What's happening? You sound like you know something about this. She looked at him with eyes that had suddenly become cold and calculating. I know we're in serious trouble unless someone does something unexpected. Before Chen could respond, the facility's emergency doors sealed automatically, engaging the blast containment protocols. Through the reinforced glass, Mia could see the device more clearly now. Its design was sophisticated, multiple detonation circuits with redundant triggers and what appeared to be a motion-sensing anti-tampering mechanism. They've sealed us in, Chen said, his voice tight with controlled fear. Standard protocol for confirmed explosives contained the blast radius. Reed! Colonel Davidson shouted from across the room. Get to the emergency exit with the others. Mia unbuckled her observer harness and stood up, her hand moving instinctively to the canvas bag at her hip. There isn't time. The words hung in the air as she moved with deliberate purpose toward the equipment locker. Davidson stared at her with growing confusion as she retrieved a specialized headset and vest from the emergency gear. What do you think you're doing? He demanded. My job, Mia replied, her fingers working at the buckles of the canvas bag. The job I was trained to do. The intercom crackled again, this time with Major Williams, voice tight with desperation. All personnel EOD team reports they cannot reach us in time. Current estimate is facility compromise in 13 minutes, 40 seconds. Mia pulled the micro-tool set from its bag, her hands moving with practiced efficiency as she checked each instrument's condition. The custom titanium implements felt familiar against her palms, and the precision optical magnifier was exactly as she'd left it. Engraved inside the worn leather case, barely visible unless she knew where to look, were the words that had defined her previous life. Steady hands, save lives. Jesus Christ, Chen whispered, watching her handle the tools with obvious expertise. Reed, what are you planning to do? What I should have done 2 years ago, she replied, moving toward the sealed entrance to Training Bay 6. What I was trained to do. You can't be serious, Davidson said. That's a live explosive device, which will be manageable if someone with the right training handles it properly. Mia finished, her voice carrying the calm certainty of someone who had done this before. The question is whether anyone in this facility is qualified to make that kind of call. Chen stared at her in amazement. You're not just an equipment specialist, are you? I used to be Captain Mia Reed, Special Forces EOD Division, she said quietly, beginning to secure communication equipment to her vest. Explosive Ordnance Disposal Specialist with 212 confirmed disarmaments. I requested transfer to equipment management 2 years ago because I was tired of staring death in the face every day. And now? Mia looked at him with eyes that had seen too much death, too much violence, too much of what human beings were capable of doing to each other. Now I'm about to remember why I was so good at it. The facility shuddered as the emergency systems engaged further containment protocols. Through the reinforced glass, Mia could see the timer on the device, 12:47 and counting down. Chen, she said, her voice carrying absolute authority, get everyone into the reinforced observer room and seal the door. If I can't disarm this, that's the only place that might survive the blast radius. That's suicide, Davidson said, but his tone had changed from commanding to uncertain. No, Mia replied, checking the micro-tools one final time. That's giving everyone the best chance of survival. As her fingers found the override for the sealed bay door, Mia felt the familiar calm settling over her, the same deadly serenity that had made her one of the most respected EOD specialists in Special Forces. She had tried to leave this life behind, tried to find peace in the quiet routine of equipment management. But some skills, once learned, never really disappear, and sometimes the only way to save lives is to face death head-on. The security override panel felt cold under Mia's fingers as she prepared to do something that violated every safety protocol in military explosive management, entering a sealed containment area with a live device. Opening that door would bypass multiple safety systems, potentially compromising the blast containment if she failed. "Reed, this is insane," Davidson said, but he was already moving to get the remaining personnel to safety. "You'll have maybe 10 minutes before that thing detonates." 10 minutes is all I need," Mia replied, tightening the specialized EOD vest around her torso and checking the communication earpiece twice. "I've disarmed more complex devices under worse conditions." Through the intercom, Major Williams' voice was tight with controlled panic. "All personnel, final containment protocols engaged. Repeat, all personnel to reinforced observer stations immediately." Mia looked through the observation window one final time, calculating distances and mechanisms with the precision of a targeting computer. The device was approximately 3 meters inside the training bay, its timer now reading 11:52 and counting down. She could see the distinctive signature of the triggering mechanism, a sophisticated pressure plate design with what appeared to be mercury switches for anti-tampering protection. "Chen," she called out, her voice carrying the calm authority of someone who had faced death before. "I need you to get on the intercom and tell Williams to remotely disable the motion sensors in Base 6. They'll interfere with my approach. He's not going to bypass safety protocols for an equipment specialist. Then, tell him the request is coming from Captain Mia Reed, Special Forces EOD Division, and that everyone's life depends on following my instructions exactly." Chen stared at her for a moment, then moved to the intercom panel. "Major Williams, this is Technical Sergeant Chen. I have Captain Mia Reed here, and she needs you to disable the motion sensors in Base 6. The intercom was silent for several seconds, then Williams' voice came back, puzzled but alert. "Did you say Captain Mia Reed? The Mia Reed from Phoenix team?" "Affirmative," Mia called out, her hands working at the security override. "I need those sensors offline, Major. Can you give me that?" "Holy!" Williams breathed, and suddenly, a series of security lights shifted from red to amber. "Phoenix, this is Williams. You have sensor override. Take the lead." Mia felt a familiar surge of adrenaline as she recognized the code name she hadn't heard in 2 years. Phoenix had been her call sign during the most classified operations, the missions that didn't officially exist, and the disarmaments that were never officially recorded. Apparently, her reputation had traveled further than she'd realized. "Chen, clear the area," she ordered, her voice dropping to the calm, measured tone she'd used during combat operations. "When I override this lock, I need everyone in the observer station with the blast doors sealed." The security override mechanism fought against multiple safety protocols, but Mia's hands moved with practiced efficiency, her muscle memory guiding her through the process she'd performed dozens of times in combat situations. The first release clicked, then the second, and finally the third safety lock. "Opening Base 6, she announced, then pulled the release handle. The effect was immediate. A series of warning lights flashed across the facility as the containment breach was registered. The sealed door to Training Base 6 slid open with a pneumatic hiss, revealing the training area beyond. In the center, what should have been an inert training device now pulsed with the unmistakable threat of live explosives. Mia's breathing remained steady, her hands remained calm, and her mind remained focused on the single task that would determine whether everyone in the facility lived or died. Through the open doorway, she could see the device clearly now, less than 10 meters away and counting down, 10:42 remaining. Its construction was sophisticated, with multiple triggering mechanisms and what appeared to be enough explosive material to level the entire training wing. Mia braced herself at the threshold, her feet finding purchase on the facility's floor as she raised the optical magnifier to her eye. The micro tools felt perfectly balanced in her hand, as she began the approach sequence that had become second nature. Slow, deliberate steps, controlled breathing, mind focused entirely on the threat ahead. "Phoenix, this is Williams." The comm unit in her ear crackled. "Whatever you're going to do it now. I'm showing detonation in less than 11 minutes." Mia's world narrowed to a single point of focus, the explosive device's primary trigger mechanism visible beneath a clear access panel. It was a target no bigger than a credit card, but she'd faced similar challenges under worse conditions. The training bay felt unnaturally quiet as she approached the device, each step carefully measured to avoid triggering any secondary sensors. The bomb sat on the training table, its digital display coldly counting down the seconds: 10, 27, 10, 26, 10, 25. She kneeled beside the table, bringing her eyes level with the device. Her mind cataloged every wire, every connection, every trigger with the precision that had made her legendary in special forces. "Multiple triggering mechanisms," she muttered into her comm, knowing Williams and the others were listening. "Primary detonator is pressure-sensitive with mercury switch anti-tampering. Secondary circuit appears to be a collapsing circuit with, interesting, a tertiary dead man switch. Can you disarm it?" Williams' voice was steady, professional, but Mia could hear the tension underneath. "I'm going to have to bypass all 3 triggering systems simultaneously," she replied, selecting 3 micro-tools from her kit. The precision required, well, let's just say I'm glad I kept practicing. "Shit," Williams muttered. "That's like performing 3 surgeries at once." 9 minutes, 12 seconds. Mia responded, positioning her tools with absolute precision. More than enough time. The first step was to neutralize the mercury switches that would trigger if the device was moved. Using a specialized stabilizing clamp no bigger than a hairpin, she carefully immobilized the first mercury bubble, preventing it from completing the circuit if disturbed. "First anti-tampering measure secured," she announced, her voice carrying the same matter-of-fact tone she might use when reporting a successful equipment inventory. Moving to the pressure plate. The pressure plate was more complex, a series of hair triggers that would activate if the device's weight distribution changed even slightly. Using a set of microscopically thin shims, Mia began the delicate process of isolating each trigger point. "How's it looking, Phoenix?" Williams asked, the tension in his voice growing as the timer continued its relentless countdown. 7:46, 7:45. "Pressure plate is 60% neutralized," Mia replied, not looking up from her work. "The design is elegant. Military-grade components, but with custom modifications. Someone knew what they were doing." As she worked, a realization began forming in her mind. The device wasn't just sophisticated. It was familiar. The wiring pattern, the trigger configuration, even the timer display. She'd seen this design before. "Williams," she said, her voice suddenly sharper. "This isn't a random device. This is a Blackwater special." The comm was silent for several seconds. "Are you certain?" "Positive. The signature is unmistakable. Mercury switches in a triangular configuration, collapsing circuit with redundant power sources, and that distinctive pressure plate design. Someone from Blackwater Security built this." "That's impossible," Williams replied. "Blackwater was disbanded 3 years ago after the Tehran incident." "Then someone's carrying on their legacy," Mia said, continuing her delicate work with the pressure plate. "And they know exactly what they're doing." The timer continued its countdown. 6:18, 6:17. With the mercury switches secured and the pressure plate nearly neutralized, Mia turned her attention to the most challenging component, the collapsing circuit that would trigger detonation if any wire was cut in the wrong sequence. "Beginning collapsing circuit bypass," she announced, selecting her finest micro-tool, a hair-thin probe with a specialized coating that could redirect electrical current without interrupting it. This was the moment of truth, the procedure that separated elite EOD specialists from everyone else. One wrong move, one slight tremor in her hand, and the circuit would collapse, sending the detonation signal to the explosives. 5 minutes. Williams reported unnecessarily. Mia could see the timer perfectly well. 5 o'clock. 4:59. Her world narrowed to the microscopic space between wire and circuit board, her breathing so controlled that she seemed barely to breathe at all. The micro-tools moved with impossible precision, guided by hands that remained perfectly steady despite the stakes. First junction bypassed, she reported as she successfully redirected the current around the first trigger point, moving to the second. The second junction was more complex, with 3 separate wires that needed to be bypassed simultaneously. This was why she had been selected for Phoenix Team. Her ability to perform multiple precision tasks at once, her hands moving independently, but in perfect coordination. 4 minutes, Williams reported. The tension in the comm was palpable now, but Mia remained utterly calm, her focus absolute. The second junction yielded to her expertise. The current successfully redirected without triggering the collapse. Second junction secured, moving to final trigger point. The final trigger point was the most challenging, a hair-thin wire connected to what appeared to be a custom-designed microprocessor. This wasn't standard military explosive design. This was something created by someone who understood both electronics and explosives at a master level. As she positioned her tools for the final bypass, Mia noticed something that made her blood run cold. A small symbol etched into the circuit board, barely visible even with her magnifier. A stylized phoenix. "Williams," she said, her voice suddenly tight. "This device has a phoenix marker." The comm went silent then. "Are you saying this is one of ours?" "Not ours. Mine." The realization hit her with stunning clarity. "This is one of my training designs. From 3 years ago, when I was developing countermeasures for the advanced EOD course." "How is that possible?" "Someone with access to my training materials," Mia replied, her hands never pausing in their delicate work despite the shocking realization. Someone who knew exactly what they were doing. The timer continued its merciless countdown. 2:17, 2:16. With renewed focus, Mia continued the bypass procedure. She knew this design intimately, had created it herself as the ultimate training challenge. The irony wasn't lost on her. She was now facing her own creation, a device designed to be nearly impossible to disarm. "Final junction approach," she announced, positioning her micro-tools with absolute precision. This was the most delicate part. 3 separate connections that needed to be bypassed simultaneously, with no margin for error. 2 minutes, Williams reported, his voice now tight with controlled fear. Mia took a deep breath, steadied her hands, and began the final procedure. Her micro-tools moved with impossible precision, redirecting currents and isolating triggers with the accuracy that had made her legendary. First contact, second contact, third contact. She narrated as each tool found its mark. The timer read 1:32 as she completed the final bypass. The collapsing circuit was now neutralized, leaving only the primary detonator to disarm. "Collapsing circuit neutralized," she reported, moving to primary detonator. The primary detonator was deceptively simple, a direct connection between the timer and the main explosive charge. But Mia knew better. This simplicity hid the most dangerous trap of all. "Williams, I need absolute silence for the next 60 seconds, she ordered, selecting her finest pair of micro-tweezers from the kit. The primary detonator required her to physically separate the timer from the explosive charge, a procedure so delicate that even her breathing could disrupt it. With absolute focus, she positioned the tweezers on either side of the connection point. The timer read 0:47 as she began to apply the slightest pressure to the connection. Millimeter by millimeter, she separated the components, creating an infinitesimal gap between timer and detonator. 0:34, 0:33. The gap widened, almost invisible to the naked eye but clear through her magnifier. Just a few more millimeters, and the connection would be broken. 0:22, 0:21. With one final, perfectly controlled movement, Mia separated the components completely. The timer continued to count down, but it was now isolated from the detonation circuit. "Primary detonator neutralized," she announced, her voice still carrying the calm precision of an elite specialist. "Device is secure." The timer reached 0:100, the display flashing ominously, but nothing happened. The explosive remained inert, its multiple triggering systems now completely bypassed. "Phoenix, confirmed status. Williams. Voice came through the comm, tight with tension. Device is neutralized, Mia replied, already beginning the process of securing the components for evidence collection. All triggering systems bypassed. Explosive is inert. The silence that followed was profound, then erupted into cheers and exclamations that she could hear both through her comm and from the observer station beyond the bay. Phoenix. Mia. Williams. Voice was thick with emotion. You just saved everyone in this facility. Mia carefully placed her micro-tools back in their canvas pouch, the familiar routine helping to center her as the adrenaline began to subside. Just doing my job, sir, she replied quietly. Just doing what I was trained to do. But as she secured the disarmed device for the evidence team, she couldn't shake the unsettling knowledge that someone had recreated her design, someone who knew her work intimately, someone who had targeted this facility specifically. The Phoenix symbol seemed to stare back at her from the circuit board, a calling card left deliberately for her to find. This wasn't a random attack, it was personal. As the security doors unsealed and personnel began to enter the training bay, Mia remained kneeling beside the disarmed device, her mind already racing through the implications. Her quiet life as an equipment specialist was over. The legend of Phoenix had awakened, and there was no going back to the peaceful anonymity she'd worked so hard to create. The remainder of the day passed in a strange, almost surreal quiet. Word had spread through the facility with the speed of wildfire. The unassuming equipment specialist who organized toolkits in the corner of the warehouse had just single-handedly disarmed a sophisticated explosive device with nothing but a set of micro-tweezers and unparalleled skill. Dozens of lives had been saved because of her, and everyone knew it. Mia had returned to her desk in the equipment room, a worn notebook once again balanced on her knees as she completed her incident report. To anyone watching, she appeared to be doing exactly what she'd always done, documenting every detail with meticulous precision. But her hands were steadier than they'd been in months, and her breathing carried the calm rhythm of someone who had remembered exactly who she was. Captain Reed. Colonel Davidson's voice interrupted her thoughts. She noticed he was using her former rank now. I need to speak with you when you've completed your report. Yes, sir, Mia replied, not looking up from her notebook. She was writing a detailed analysis, documenting wire configurations, trigger mechanisms, and disarmament parameters with the same precision she'd brought to equipment manifests. Some habits never died, and thorough documentation was one of them. Technical Sergeant Chen had positioned himself at the desk across from her, openly staring with the fascination of someone who had just witnessed a legend come to life. Captain, he said quietly, I have to ask, how long have you been carrying those tools? Every day for 2 years, Mia replied, still writing in her notebook. Same as I've been carrying my equipment inspection tools. You never know when you might need them. But why equipment management? Why give up EOD operations for this? Chen gestured around the warehouse. Mia finally looked up from her notebook, her amber eyes carrying a weariness that had nothing to do with physical exhaustion. Because I got tired of staring death in the face, Chen. Because I wanted to spend my days making sure proper equipment reached disposal teams instead of always being the one cutting the wire with 3 seconds left on the timer. The intercom crackled with Major Williams' voice. All personnel security teams have completed their sweep of the facility. Standard operations will resume tomorrow at 0800 hours. As the announcement ended, Mia could see the base growing quieter through the windows, personnel returning to their regular duties now that the immediate crisis had passed. The equipment warehouse looked like every military storage facility she'd ever seen. Functional, organized, and comfortingly predictable. Captain Reed. A new voice came over her radio. It was unfamiliar, authoritative, and carried the crisp pronunciation of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. This is General Patricia Morrison, Commanding Officer of the Joint EOD Command. I need to speak with you immediately. Mia felt her stomach tighten. General Morrison was a name she recognized from her Special Forces days, a brilliant tactician who had risen through the ranks by understanding exactly how to use specialized assets like Phoenix. If Morrison was personally requesting a meeting, it meant word of today's incident had already reached the highest levels of command. Acknowledged, General, Mia replied, her voice carefully neutral. Chen leaned closer, lowering his voice. That's not normal, is it? Generals don't usually reach out to equipment specialists. No, Mia said quietly. They don't. The security debrief was thorough, Major Williams bringing in specialists from across the base to document every aspect of the incident. As the team exited the conference room, Mia could see a convoy of vehicles waiting, more vehicles than a routine security response would require. "Captain Reed." Colonel Davidson's voice came one final time. "Report to my office immediately." Mia secured her notebook in its usual place and checked that her micro-tools were properly secured in their canvas bag. As she stood to leave, she noticed that every person in the facility was watching her, not with the dismissive glances she'd grown accustomed to, but with the kind of attention usually reserved for visiting dignitaries or returning heroes. The hallway opened into the administration wing, and Mia stepped through the doorway into the harsh, fluorescent light of the military offices. The air was cool and sterile, carrying the familiar smell of paper, coffee, and the underlying tension that permeated every military installation after a security incident. Colonel Davidson was waiting at his office door, but he wasn't alone. Beside him stood a woman in crisp uniform, with the distinctive stars of a general officer on her collar. General Morrison was taller than Mia had expected, but her presence filled the space around her with the unmistakable authority of someone who had commanded respect in the most dangerous places on Earth. "Captain Mia Reed," General Morrison said, extending her hand. "I've been looking forward to meeting you for a very long time." "Ma'am," Mia replied, accepting the handshake with the precise formality she'd learned in her first days of military service. "Walk with me, Captain. We have a great deal to discuss." They moved away from the office toward a small courtyard outside the administrative building, Colonel Davidson trailing behind them, with the deference of someone who clearly understood that he was witnessing a conversation between equals, regardless of rank structure. "I received a very interesting report about 30 minutes ago," General Morrison said as they walked. "Something about Phoenix coming out of retirement to save an entire training facility." "I'm not in retirement, ma'am. I'm serving as an equipment specialist with the 37th EOD Division." "By choice." It wasn't a question, and Mia recognized the tone. Morrison had done her homework, had read the classified files that documented Mia's voluntary transfer from Special Forces to equipment management. "Yes, ma'am. By choice." "And today?" Mia stopped walking and looked directly at the general. "Today I did what needed to be done to protect everyone from an immediate threat. Nothing more, nothing less." Morrison smiled, and Mia realized she was being evaluated with the same precision she'd once used to evaluate explosive devices. "Major Williams tells me you disarmed a multi-stage explosive with 3 separate triggering mechanisms in under 10 minutes, using nothing but a basic micro-tool kit. He also tells me you identified it as your own training design, modified for maximum lethality." "I did my job, ma'am." "No, Captain. You did Phoenix's job. The question is whether you're ready to do it again." The words hung in the air between them like a challenge, and Mia felt the familiar weight of decision pressing down on her shoulders. She had left Special Forces because she was tired of the pressure, tired of being defined by her ability to stay calm while dismantling death with surgical precision. But today had reminded her that sometimes the only way to save lives was to use the skills others feared. "General Morrison," she said quietly, "I need to ask you something." "Go ahead." "How many people die when someone like me refuses to do what they're trained to do?" Morrison's expression softened slightly, and Mia saw understanding in her eyes. "That's the question every specialist has to answer for themselves, Captain. But I can tell you this. Dozens of people live today because you were willing to do what nobody else could do. And if I go back to organizing equipment kits, then you go back to organizing equipment kits, and everyone respects your choice. But you and I both know that there are threats out there that require someone with your particular skills to handle them." Mia looked across the courtyard, watching soldiers going about their daily routines, checking equipment, maintaining tools, preparing for missions that would take them into harm's way. Each of them was someone's son or daughter, someone's husband or wife, someone who deserved to come home safely at the end of their duty. "I have one condition," she said finally. "Name it. I continue my equipment duties as my primary assignment. If you need Phoenix, you know where to find me. But when the mission is over, I go back to being Sergeant Mia Reed, equipment specialist." General Morrison extended her hand again. "Deal, Captain. Welcome back to the war." As they shook hands, Mia felt something shift inside her, Not a return to her old life, but an acceptance of who she truly was. She was an equipment specialist who happened to be one of the most skilled EOD technicians ever trained by the United States military. She was someone who chose peace but was ready for war. She was Phoenix, whether she wanted to be or not. 3 days after the explosive incident, Mia found herself in the most uncomfortable position imaginable, sitting in a briefing room full of senior officers, while a PowerPoint presentation detailed her heroic actions for the official record. The slides included disarmament procedures, trigger mechanism analysis, and explosive component data that made her 10-minute disarmament sound like something from an action movie rather than the desperate improvisation it had actually been. As you can see, Colonel Davidson was saying, clicking to the next slide, Captain Reed's disarmament of the sophisticated device represents a textbook example of adaptive tactical thinking under extreme pressure. Mia shifted uncomfortably in her chair. The same officer who had dismissed her equipment concerns 3 days ago was now presenting her actions as if he'd personally trained her for the mission. Around the table, a collection of majors, lieutenant colonels, and 2 full colonels nodded appreciatively while taking notes for their own reports. The precision required for this disarmament, Davidson continued, represents the kind of specialized skill set that our military needs to leverage more effectively in future operations. General Morrison, who had been silent throughout most of the presentation, finally spoke up. Captain Reed, do you have anything to add to Colonel Davidson's assessment? Mia looked around the room at the expectant faces, each one clearly hoping for some inspiring words about duty, honor, and the warrior spirit. Instead, she stood up and walked to the front of the room, her movements carrying the quiet authority that had made her legendary in special forces. With respect, sir, she said, addressing Davidson directly, you're missing the most important part of this story. Davidson's face reddened slightly. Which is? 3 days ago, I tried to warn you about calibration problems that could have compromised the training exercise. You told me to stick to what I know and leave the tactical planning to the real officers. The room went silent. Several of the officers shifted uncomfortably in their chairs, realizing they were witnessing a professional confrontation that could have serious consequences for everyone involved. Captain Reed, Davidson said carefully, I don't see how equipment calibration relates to. It relates, Mia interrupted, because if you had listened to my technical expertise about tool calibration, we might have noticed the unauthorized equipment that introduced the explosive into the facility in the first place. If you had treated me like the technical specialist I am instead of just an equipment jockey, 17 trainees might not have been in danger. General Morrison leaned forward with obvious interest. Explain. Mia moved to the tactical display and called up the security footage from the training area. The calibration problems I identified created an opportunity for someone to switch the training device with a live explosive. The non-standard tools I flagged were used to conceal components that shouldn't have been there. That put us all at risk for 47 minutes before anyone realized what was happening. She traced the security timeline with her finger, highlighting the vulnerable periods where the training devices had been left unattended. The bomber was able to plant the device because we were exactly where standard procedure dictated we'd be, doing exactly what they calculated we'd do, and ignoring exactly the warning signs they expected us to ignore. The room was completely silent now, every officer realizing the implications of what she was saying. The enemy didn't get lucky, Mia continued. They got predictable. They knew our equipment procedures, they knew our training protocols, and they knew that nobody listens to equipment specialists when they identify problems. Colonel Davidson's face had gone pale. Are you suggesting that? I'm suggesting that expertise comes in many forms, sir. Sometimes the person who knows how to save lives is the same person you've been telling to stay quiet and do their job. General Morrison stood up and everyone in the room immediately came to attention. Captain Reed, step outside with me. They walked out onto a balcony overlooking the base's main thoroughfare, where soldiers and vehicles moved with the controlled urgency of a military installation in training mode. Morrison didn't speak for several moments, apparently organizing her thoughts. That was either very brave or very stupid, she said finally. Probably both, ma'am. You just dressed down a full colonel in front of half the base command staff. Yes, ma'am, I did. Morrison turned to face her directly. Why? Mia looked out across the base, watching a group of trainees preparing for their next certification exercise. Because in 6 hours, those trainees are going to handle explosive devices that could save lives or end them, depending on how well they're prepared and equipped. They're going to trust that someone with expertise checked every detail, made sure everything was calibrated properly, verified that nothing would compromise their safety under pressure. And if Colonel Davidson's attitude toward technical expertise represents standard thinking in this command, those trainees are going to die because someone thought equipment management was beneath their attention. Morrison was quiet for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Point taken. But you've also made yourself a target for every officer in that room who thinks you just humiliated their friend. I know, and you did it anyway. Yes, ma'am. Why? Mia turned to meet Morrison's gaze directly. Because 3 days ago, I remembered something I'd forgotten during 2 years of being treated like I was invisible. I'm not just good at disarming bombs, General. I'm good at understanding complex systems, identifying problems before they become catastrophic, and finding solutions that other people miss. And maybe it's time I stopped hiding that. Morrison smiled, and Mia realized she was looking at someone who understood exactly what it meant to be underestimated because of preconceptions and assumptions. Captain Reed, I'm going to make you an offer. Ma'am, I'm creating a new position, Technical Operations Specialist, reporting directly to my office. Your job will be to identify systemic problems in our EOD procedures, recommend solutions, and implement changes that improve our operational effectiveness. Mia felt her heart racing. And my equipment duties, quote, will continue as your primary assignment. But when I need someone to look at the big picture, to see problems that the rest of us are missing, I'm going to call on you. What about Colonel Davidson? Colonel Davidson is going to learn that expertise comes in many forms, and that smart commanders listen to technical specialists regardless of their rank or assignment. Morrison's voice carried the edge of someone who was about to have a very pointed conversation with a subordinate officer. General Morrison, I need to ask you something. Go ahead. If I take this position, am I going to become Phoenix full-time again? Morrison considered the question carefully. Captain, 3 days ago, you saved dozens of lives by using skills you tried to leave behind. Today, you potentially saved dozens more by using skills that most people never recognized you had. The question isn't whether you're going to become Phoenix again. The question is whether you're ready to become something more. Which is, someone who uses all of their capabilities in service of something larger than themselves. Mia looked out across the base one more time, watching the endless cycle of preparation, training, and deployment that defined military life. Somewhere out there, trainees were depending on equipment specialists like her to get the details right. Somewhere else, EOD teams were depending on people like Phoenix to handle threats that nobody else could neutralize. I accept your offer, General. Outstanding. Report to my office tomorrow morning at 0800. We have a lot of work to do. As Morrison walked back toward the briefing room, Mia remained on the balcony, watching the sun set over the mountains that surrounded the base. For 2 years, she had tried to be invisible, tried to find peace in the routine work of equipment operations, but today had taught her something important. Sometimes the greatest service you can provide is refusing to hide your light under a bushel. Tomorrow, she would begin a new chapter of her military career, one that honored both the EOD specialist she had been and the equipment expert she had become. She would continue checking inventory and calibrating tools, but she would also look for the bigger problems, the systemic issues that could cost lives if left unaddressed. The legend of Phoenix would continue, but it would be joined by something equally important: the expertise of Captain Mia Reed, Technical Operations Specialist, who understood that real strength came not from hiding your capabilities, but from choosing exactly when and how to use them. 6 months later, Mia found herself in the equipment room of another training facility, running final inspections before what had become known throughout the command as a Reed Standard Protocol. The new procedures she'd developed had reduced equipment-related incidents by 87% and decreased preparation times by 21%. But more importantly, they had eliminated the kind of security vulnerabilities that had made her first encounter with the disguised explosive possible. Captain Reed called out Airman First Class Jessica Torres, a young equipment specialist who had requested assignment to Mia's team specifically to learn from the legendary Phoenix. I've completed the primary kit inspection, all tools calibrated, security verified, equipment distribution within optimal parameters. Outstanding, Torres. What's our deviation from standard? +0, 3%, ma'am. Well within acceptable limits. Mia smiled as she made the final notation in her leather notebook, the same worn brown journal she'd been carrying for 2 years, now supplemented by a tablet computer that contained the standardized inspection protocols she'd developed for the entire EOD division. The old and the new working together. The equipment room door opened with its familiar metallic click, and Technical Sergeant Chen stepped inside, now wearing the insignia of a training coordinator and serving as Mia's assistant operations specialist. "Captain," he said with a grin, "we've got visitors." Behind him walked General Morrison, followed by a familiar figure that made Mia's breath catch in her throat. Major Thomas Mitchell, her former Special Forces team leader, now wearing the eagles of a colonel and sporting a new scar that suggested recent deployment to somewhere with very active threats. "Captain Reed," General Morrison said formally, then broke into a smile. "Outstanding work on the new security protocols. I just received a report that your procedures have been adopted by 3 other EOD divisions, with requests for implementation training from 6 more. Thank you, ma'am. The team has worked hard to refine the system." Colonel Mitchell stepped forward, and Mia saw in his eyes the same mixture of professional respect and personal affection that had defined their relationship during her Special Forces days. "Mia, it's good to see you. Colonel Mitchell, you're looking well. So are you. I heard about your new position, about the changes you've implemented. I also heard about some of your more dramatic contributions to mission success." Mia glanced at Torres and Chen, both of whom were trying very hard to look busy while obviously listening to every word. The story of Phoenix's explosive disarmament had become the stuff of legend throughout the military EOD community, but it was rarely discussed openly. "I do what needs to be done, sir, same as always." Mitchell nodded, then pulled out a small wooden box from his pocket. "That's actually why I'm here. This belongs to you." He opened the box to reveal a medal that Mia had never seen before. A distinctive design featuring crossed tools over an explosive device, with a banner that read, "Technical Excellence Under Fire." The ribbon was deep blue with silver edges, and the entire medal had the weight and craftsmanship of something designed to last forever. "What is this?" Mia asked. General Morrison stepped forward. "The Distinguished Technical Service Medal, Captain. It's a new decoration created specifically to recognize individuals who demonstrate extraordinary technical expertise in life-threatening situations. You're the first recipient." "Ma'am, I don't understand." 6 months ago, Morrison explained, you identified a systemic problem in our equipment protocols that was making our training vulnerable to sabotage. You developed solutions that have since been adopted across multiple commands. 3 days later, you used specialized EOD skills to neutralize a threat when our standard security systems failed." Colonel Mitchell picked up the explanation. "The review board determined that your actions represent a new category of military excellence. The integration of technical expertise with combat effectiveness in ways that save lives and improve mission success." "Mia," Morrison said quietly, "you've created something that didn't exist before. You've shown that equipment specialists can be tactical assets, that technical experts can be warriors, and that sometimes the most important battles are won by people who understand both the details and the big picture." Mia looked at the medal, then at the faces surrounding her, Torres and Chen, who represented the new generation of equipment specialists who understood that technical excellence was a form of combat readiness. Morrison, who had recognized that expertise came in many forms, and Mitchell, who had seen her evolve from a pure "I accept this medal on behalf of every technical specialist who has ever been told to stay quiet and do their job," she said finally. "And I promise to continue using whatever skills I have in service of the mission and the people who depend on us." The ceremony was brief and informal, conducted in the equipment room where Mia felt most at home. As Morrison pinned the medal to her uniform, Mia realized that she had finally found the balance she'd been seeking, a way to honor both the EOD specialist she had been and the technical expert she had become. After the others left, Mia remained in the equipment room with Torres and Chen, completing the final preparations for their next training cycle. The young airman was obviously bursting with questions, but her training had taught her to wait for the appropriate moment. "Torres," Mia said finally, "you've got something you want to ask." "Ma'am, I was wondering, How do you do it? How do you stay focused on the technical details when you know you could be called on for other things? Mia closed her notebook and looked at the young woman who reminded her so much of herself at that age. Eager to serve, willing to learn, but struggling to understand how all the pieces fit together. The technical details are the other things, Torres. Every tool I calibrate might be the one that prevents a critical mistake during a disarmament. Every inspection I conduct might identify a problem that could cost lives if left unaddressed. Every protocol I implement might be the one that stops an attack before it happens. But what about the EOD skills? What about Phoenix? The room fell silent. Wilson's posture shifted slightly, reassessing her with new eyes. You're Phoenix, aren't you? I thought that was just a rumor. Was Phoenix, Mia corrected, opening her notebook. Now I'm the equipment girl who's going to make sure you all go home to your families. So let's start with the Konar province incident from last month. For the next 3 hours, Mia deconstructed each failed disarmament with surgical precision, identifying patterns that had been missed in the official reports. The same unusual wiring configuration appeared in each device, alongside a distinctive pressure switch design that she recognized all too well. These aren't insurgent IEDs, she concluded, sketching a circuit diagram that made several technicians lean forward with newfound interest. They're military-grade devices modified to appear improvised, and they're being designed specifically to target EOD specialists. How can you be sure? Asked Corporal Rodriguez, the youngest member of the team. Mia pointed to the diagram. Because this trigger configuration is based on a classified American design. It was developed for a special training program 4 years ago, a program I helped create to teach EOD specialists how to handle next-generation threats. Wilson's expression darkened. You're saying someone with access to classified EOD training materials is building bombs designed to kill our techs? That's exactly what I'm saying, Mia replied. And they're testing them here before deploying them elsewhere. The implications settled over the room like a heavy cloud. If Mia was right, they were facing an enemy who understood their procedures intimately, who could anticipate their approach to each device and design countermeasures specifically to defeat them. So what do we do? Jameson asked, breaking the uncomfortable silence. Mia closed her notebook. We adapt. Starting tomorrow, we implement completely new protocols. We rebuild your equipment kits with modified tools. And we train you to recognize these signatures before you approach the device. Wilson, no longer hostile but deeply concerned, leaned forward. And if we encounter one of these devices in the field before training is complete, then you call me, Mia said simply. Because I'm going out with your teams until this threat is neutralized. Major Jameson raised an eyebrow. That's not part of your mandate from technical operations. No, Mia agreed. But it's why I'm really here. Later that evening, as the desert sun sank below the horizon in a spectacular display of orange and crimson, Mia sat alone on a concrete barrier at the edge of the compound, her notebook open beside her. She was sketching modifications to the standard EOD kit, replacing conventional wire cutters with custom titanium versions that wouldn't trigger the specialized sensors, adding electromagnetic shielding to prevent remote detonation. Mind some company? Mia looked up to find Master Sergeant Wilson standing nearby holding 2 cups of coffee. She nodded to the space beside her, accepting the offered cup with a grateful smile. I owe you an apology, Wilson said after a moment of silence. I judged you before I knew who you were. You judged me based on my assignment, Mia corrected. It's a common mistake. Still, he stared out at the darkening landscape. When you've been doing this job as long as I have, you start to think you've seen everything, that no one can teach you anything new. Mia sipped her coffee, appreciating its bitter warmth. The day you stop learning is the day you should quit EOD work. Wilson chuckled. Fair point. He gestured toward her notebook. What are you working on? Modifications to your equipment. The standard issue tools won't work against these new devices. They're designed to detect our usual approach and trigger if we follow procedure. Like they know exactly what we're going to do before we do it, Wilson said grimly. Exactly like that. Mia turned to a new page in her notebook. Which is why we need to change everything, our approach, our tools, our techniques. We need to become unpredictable. Wilson studied her for a long moment. You know who's behind this, don't you? Mia's hand paused over her notebook. I have suspicions. Care to share them? Not until I'm certain. She closed the notebook. For now, I need your team to trust me. Tomorrow we start intensive training on the new protocols. They'll trust you, Wilson assured her. After today's briefing, they're convinced. Even Rodriguez, and that kid questions everything. Good. Questions keep you alive in this business. Mia stood, gathering her materials. 0600 tomorrow, Master Sergeant. We've got a lot of work to do. Yes, ma'am. Wilson hesitated, then added, For what it's worth, I'm glad they sent you. Phoenix or equipment specialist. Doesn't matter. What matters is, you know what you're doing. Mia smiled, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the coffee. Get some rest, Wilson. Tomorrow we start fighting back. Captain, I'm ordering immediate evaluation of all Phoenix training materials, Morrison said. If someone's using our own designs against us, we need to know how widespread the breach is. With respect, General, I don't think this is just about the designs, Mia replied. The Phoenix symbol is too deliberate, too personal. Someone wants me, to make specific connections. Sinclair? That's the obvious conclusion. But it feels too convenient, too staged. Mia hesitated, then continued. Request permission to expand the investigation, ma'am. I need access to Sinclair's classified file, the complete version, not the redacted one I received after his death. Morrison's expression was unreadable. That's beyond your clearance, Captain. So is having EOD specialists targeted with their own training materials. Mia countered. Someone's playing a game, and they've made it clear they want me involved. I can't fight an enemy I don't understand. After a long moment, Morrison nodded. Very well. I'll have the complete file transmitted to your secure tablet. But Mia, she leaned closer to the camera, be careful what you wish for. Some questions have answers we're not prepared to hear. The transmission ended, leaving Mia alone with her thoughts and a growing sense that she was being drawn into something far more complex than a series of sophisticated IEDs. Someone was using her past, her training, her very identity as Phoenix against her. And as she stared at the Phoenix symbol now placed carefully on her desk, Mia couldn't shake the feeling that the real target had always been her. Later that night, as the base settled into its evening routine, Mia sat alone in her temporary quarters, Sinclair's unredacted file open on her secure tablet. The information it contained had shaken her to her core. Major Thomas Sinclair hadn't been killed in the explosion that reportedly claimed his life. He had been recruited for a classified operation so sensitive that his death had been fabricated to provide cover. For nearly 2 years he had been working deep undercover, infiltrating a network of former military contractors who had gone rogue, selling their specialized knowledge to the highest bidder. And, 6 weeks ago, all contact with Sinclair had ceased. His last transmission had contained a single word: Phoenix. A soft knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. She closed the tablet and moved cautiously to answer it, her hand instinctively reaching for the sidearm she kept nearby. Who is it? Wilson, ma'am. I need to speak with you. It's urgent. Mia opened the door to find the Master Sergeant looking uncharacteristically unsettled. What is it? We just received a transmission on a secure channel, one that's been inactive for months. It's addressed to Phoenix. He handed her a printout. I think you need to see this. The message was brief, its meaning clear only to someone who understood its context. The nest is compromised. The apprentice has become the hunter. Find me where it began. Mia read it twice, her mind racing. There was only one person who would use these specific references, only one person who would know what they meant to her. Sinclair is alive, she said quietly. And he's trying to warn us. Warn us about what? Mia looked up, her expression hardening with resolve. About the fact that someone has turned our own weapons against us. Someone who knows exactly how we think, how we operate, how we disarm. Another Phoenix operator? Worse, Mia replied, gathering her equipment with renewed urgency. Someone I trained myself. Dawn broke over Bagram Air Base with a brilliant cascade of pinks and oranges that seemed to mock the gravity of the moment. Captain Mia Reed stood on the tarmac beside a Black Hawk helicopter, reviewing her equipment one final time while Major Jameson briefed the small team that would accompany her. Where it began, Mia murmured to herself, double-checking the specialized tools in her canvas bag. The cryptic message from Sinclair had kept her awake most of the night, until the meaning finally crystallized in her mind. There was only one place he could mean, the abandoned training facility in the Sarobi district where Phoenix team had conducted their first field exercises 5 years ago. "Captain, we're ready when you are," announced Master Sergeant Wilson, approaching with his gear already stowed. The veteran EOD technician had volunteered without hesitation when Mia explained the mission despite the considerable risks. "Last chance to back out, Wilson," Mia said quietly. "What we're heading into isn't a standard EOD situation. If Sinclair's message is accurate, we're tracking someone who knows every countermeasure, every protocol we've ever developed." Wilson adjusted his tactical vest with the calm efficiency of a man who had faced death too many times to be intimidated by its proximity. "With respect, Captain, that's exactly why you need someone watching your back. Even Phoenix needs a wingman." A ghost of a smile crossed Mia's face. "Fair enough. Mount up." The helicopter lifted off with a powerful surge, banking sharply to the east as it gained altitude. Through the open door, Mia watched the base shrink beneath them, its orderly arrangement of buildings and barriers giving way to the rugged mountains and valleys that had sheltered warriors for centuries. Beside her sat Lieutenant Parker, a communication specialist added to the team at the last minute by Major Jameson. The young officer kept checking his equipment with nervous precision, clearly uncomfortable with field operations. "First time outside the wire, Lieutenant?" Mia asked over the roar of the rotors. "Yes, ma'am," Parker admitted. "I usually manage communications from the TOC. Just stick close and follow instructions. We'll be fine." The truth was less reassuring than her words suggested. If her suspicions were correct, they were flying directly into a confrontation with someone who had intimate knowledge of Phoenix operations, someone who had been deliberately targeting EOD teams with increasingly sophisticated devices. 30 minutes into the flight, the pilot's voice crackled through their headsets. "5 minutes to LZ, Captain. Be advised, satellite shows no activity in the area, but visibility is limited due to the terrain." "Understood." "Take us in low and fast," Mia replied, checking her sidearm one final time. The abandoned training facility came into view as they cleared a jagged ridge line, a collection of concrete structures, partially reclaimed by the harsh environment, situated in a natural bowl between 3 mountain peaks. It had been chosen for its isolation, allowing Phoenix team to practice with live explosives far from civilian populations or prying eyes. "Brings back memories," Mia muttered as the helicopter descended toward a flat area that had once served as the landing zone. "Good ones?" Wilson asked. "Different ones," she replied. The moment the helicopter touched down, Mia sensed something was wrong. The facility appeared exactly as it should after years of abandonment. Weathered, partially collapsed in places, devoid of human presence. But her instincts, honed through hundreds of high-stress operations, were screaming a warning. "Hold position," she ordered as the team prepared to disembark. Something's not right. Scanning the complex through tactical binoculars, she methodically checked each approach path, each doorway, each window. Nothing moved, nothing seemed out of place, yet the sense of wrongness persisted. Then she saw it, a faint reflection from the central building's upper floor, the briefest glint of sunlight on glass or metal. Someone was watching them. "Change of plans," she announced. "Wilson, you're with me. Parker, stay with the pilot and maintain communications. If you don't hear from us every 15 minutes, get airborne and call for backup." "Ma'am," Parker began to protest. "Protocol dictates." "This isn't a protocol situation, Lieutenant." Mia cut him off. "This is a Phoenix operation now. Standard rules don't apply." She and Wilson exited the helicopter in a low crouch, using the aircraft's bulk as cover until they reached the first concrete barrier. The helicopter lifted off as planned, hovering at a safe distance but ready to return on command. We approached the main building from opposite sides, Mia instructed, sketching a quick diagram in the dust. Watch for tripwires, pressure plates, anything that looks even slightly disturbed. What about you? Wilson asked. If this person knows Phoenix operations, they'll be expecting you specifically. Mia's expression hardened. I'm counting on it. They separated, moving with the practiced caution of experienced operators in hostile territory. Mia approached from the eastern side, using the long shadows of early morning to conceal her advance. Every step was measured, every placement of her boots carefully considered. This wasn't just an abandoned training facility. It was potentially the most sophisticated trap she had ever walked into. The main building had once housed the command center for the training operations, a two-story concrete structure with multiple entry points and a clear view of the surrounding area. As she neared the eastern entrance, Mia detected the faint but unmistakable signs of recent activity. Disturbed dust patterns, subtle indentations in the hard-packed earth that suggested someone had stood guard. Her radio crackled softly. West side clear, Wilson reported, approaching entry point now. Proceed with extreme caution, Mia replied. I've got signs of recent activity on my side. The eastern doorway stood partially open, its metal surface scarred by years of harsh weather and neglect. Mia approached at an angle, using her tactical mirror to check for obvious traps before attempting entry. Nothing visible, but that meant little when dealing with someone of Phoenix-level training. Drawing her sidearm, she slipped through the doorway into the dimly lit interior. The building smelled of dust and abandonment, with shafts of morning sunlight cutting through collapsed sections of the roof to create islands of illumination in the gloom. Mia moved like a ghost, each footstep silent, each movement deliberate. The first floor appeared undisturbed, frozen in the moment of abandonment years earlier. Chairs still positioned around a tactical table, faded maps still pinned to walls, empty water bottles gathering dust in corners. Then she saw it. A fresh boot print in the dust, leading toward the stairwell. Someone had been here recently, and they had made no effort to conceal their presence. It wasn't carelessness. It was an invitation. Wilson, she whispered into her radio, I've got definite signs of recent activity. First floor, eastern stairwell. Roger that. I'm on the first floor, western section. Nothing unusual yet. Hold position. I'm going to check the second floor. Captain, we should regroup first. Negative. If this is who I think it is, they'll be expecting us to follow standard paired movement protocols. We need to be unpredictable. The stairwell was partially collapsed, requiring careful navigation through fallen concrete and twisted metal. Mia ascended slowly, senses hyper-alert for any sign of danger. At the top, a narrow hallway stretched in both directions, with several doorways opening onto what had once been offices and planning rooms. A soft sound, barely perceptible, like cloth brushing against concrete, came from the room at the far end of the hallway. The former command center, where Phoenix team had planned their training operations years ago. Mia approached with practiced stealth, weapon ready, every nerve ending tingling with awareness. The door to the command center stood partially open, a thin shaft of light spilling into the hallway from within. With a quick, smooth movement, she pushed the door open fully, sweeping her weapon across the room in a practiced arc, and froze. Seated at the dusty central table, as calm as if attending a routine briefing, was a man she had believed dead for 2 years. Major Thomas Sinclair looked older, his once dark hair now liberally streaked with gray, his face more deeply lined. But his eyes still held the same intense intelligence she remembered. "Hello, Phoenix," he said quietly. "I was beginning to think you wouldn't figure it out." Mia kept her weapon trained on him, her mind racing through possibilities. "You're supposed to be dead." "Yes, well, that was the point of the exercise," Sinclair replied with a faint smile. "Deep cover operations tend to require a certain detachment from one's former life. The IEDs targeting EOD teams, was that you?" Sinclair's expression darkened. "Not directly, no, but I'm responsible all the same." He gestured to the chair across from him. "We don't have much time, Mia. I suggest you lower your weapon and listen carefully. Give me one good reason not to take you in right now. Because the real threat isn't me. It's the person I've been hunting for the last 2 years. The person who's been using our own training designs against us. Sinclair leaned forward, his eyes locked on hers. The person you trained yourself. A cold weight settled in Mia's stomach as the pieces began to align in her mind. Lieutenant Allen. Very good, Sinclair nodded. I always said you were the smartest operator in Phoenix team. James Allen had been Mia's first trainee when she became an EOD instructor, brilliant, innovative, and dangerously ambitious. He had absorbed everything she taught him about explosive devices and their countermeasures, often pushing beyond the established protocols to develop his own techniques. Allen died in the Konar province ambush last year, Mia said, though even as the words left her mouth, she felt their hollowness. Did he? Or did he simply vanish, like I did, into a shadow world where former operators sell their skills to the highest bidder? Sinclair tapped a file folder on the table. Allen didn't die, Mia. He defected, taking with him detailed knowledge of every EOD protocol, every training design, every countermeasure we developed. Slowly, Mia lowered her weapon and took the seat across from her former commander. If that's true, why target EOD teams? Why leave the Phoenix symbol for me to find? The teams were practice runs, testing how effective his modified designs were against standard EOD approaches. The Phoenix symbol was his way of sending you a message. He wants you to know it's him. He wants you specifically to try to stop him. Why? Sinclair's expression was grim. Because you're the one who passed him over for Phoenix team. You deemed him too unpredictable, too willing to improvise in situations that demanded precision. Your evaluation kept him from the assignment he coveted more than anything. The memory surfaced with painful clarity. Allen's barely concealed rage when she had delivered her assessment, his cold promise that she would regret underestimating him. So this is revenge? Mia asked incredulously. Partly, but it's more than that. Sinclair slid the folder across the table. Allen's not just targeting random EOD teams anymore. He's moved to the next phase. Mia opened the folder to find detailed schematics for a device unlike anything she had ever seen. Multiple redundant triggering systems, specialized countermeasures designed to defeat standard EOD approaches, and an explosive yield calculated for maximum structural damage. What am I looking at? His masterpiece, Sinclair replied grimly. A device specifically designed to defeat even Phoenix-level disarmament techniques. And he's planted it at Bagram Air Base in the main EOD training facility. Mia's blood ran cold. When? Last night, while you were preparing to come find me. Sinclair checked his watch. It's set to detonate during this morning's training session. Approximately 90 minutes from now. We need to warn them. Mia reached for her radio, but Sinclair held up a hand. Already tried. He's jamming all standard communications frequencies. Your helicopter's radio won't work until you're well away from this area. Then we need to move, now. Mia stood, her mind already calculating flight times and disarmament scenarios. There's more, Sinclair said, his voice stopping her. Allen knows you'll figure this out. He's expecting you to race back and attempt to disarm the device. In fact, he's counting on it. What do you mean? The device at Bagram isn't his real target, Mia. It's a sophisticated fake, designed to look exactly like the real thing, but containing only enough explosive to create a small, controlled detonation. Enough to convince everyone the threat was real, but not enough to cause significant casualties. Then what's the point? The point is to get every available EOD specialist focused on Bagram while he deploys his actual device elsewhere. Sinclair handed her another document, a transport manifest for a high-value diplomatic delegation scheduled to visit a nearby provincial capital that afternoon. 3 ambassadors, 2 generals, and the Secretary of Defense. Mia read aloud, the implications sinking in. A single, precisely placed device could kill them all, and destabilize the entire regional security framework in the process, Sinclair nodded. That's Allen's real plan. The Bagram device is just an elaborate diversion. Mia's tactical mind immediately began processing options, weighing risks against possibilities. If you knew all this, why didn't you stop him yourself? Why the cryptic message to draw me here? For the first time, Sinclair looked genuinely regretful. Because I can't disarm his devices anymore, Mia. My last encounter with Allen left me with nerve damage in both hands. He held them up to reveal a slight but noticeable tremor. I can still shoot, still fight. But the micro-precision needed for EOD work is beyond me now. So you needed me. I needed the best, Sinclair corrected. And that's always been you, Phoenix. Their conversation was interrupted by Wilson's voice on the radio. Captain, I've completed my sweep of the first floor. No signs of... The transmission cut off abruptly, replaced by static. Wilson? Mia called into her radio. Wilson, report! Your sergeant just encountered one of Alan's little surprises, Sinclair said grimly. Non-lethal, but effective. He's likely unconscious. You knew this would happen? I suspected Alan would have left countermeasures. He's nothing if not thorough. Sinclair stood, checking his own weapon. We need to move. Your helicopter pilot will follow protocol and attempt to extract once communication is lost, which means he'll be walking into another of Alan's traps. Mia's mind raced through scenarios, calculating possibilities with the speed and precision that had made her legendary within Phoenix team. We have to split up. I'll get to Wilson and secure the helicopter. You get to higher ground and try to establish communication with Bagram. Warn them about the device. Alan will have thought of that. Standard communications won't work. Then use non-standard ones, Mia replied, already moving toward the door. That's what you taught me, remember? When the enemy knows your playbook, throw it away and write a new one. For the first time, a genuine smile crossed Sinclair's weathered face. I did teach you that, didn't I? They moved with synchronized efficiency, years of training together, allowing them to communicate with minimal words. At the stairwell, Mia paused for a final instruction. If I don't make it to the diplomatic convoy in time, you'll need to improvise. I always do, Sinclair replied. But you'll make it. You're Phoenix. Mia descended the stairs rapidly but carefully, alert for the same traps that had incapacitated Wilson. The first floor remained eerily quiet, dust motes dancing in the shafts of sunlight that penetrated the gloom. She found Wilson near the western entrance, unconscious, but alive. A small, sophisticated stun device lay nearby, precisely calibrated to deliver a non-lethal charge sufficient to incapacitate without causing permanent damage. It was Alan's style, elegant, effective, and designed to delay rather than destroy. Wilson, can you hear me? Mia patted his face gently, checking his vital signs. Strong pulse, regular breathing. He'd recover, but not quickly enough to help with the mission. A sudden commotion outside drew her attention, the distinctive sound of helicopter rotors changing pitch as the pilot maneuvered for landing. Parker was following protocol, returning to extract them after losing communications. No, 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 Mia muttered, rushing to the doorway. If Alan had set a trap for the helicopter, dozens could die, including her only means of reaching the diplomatic convoy in time. The Blackhawk was descending toward the landing zone, unaware of the danger. Mia sprinted across the open ground, waving her arms frantically and shouting into her radio despite the jamming. Wave off! Wave off! Potential threat on the LZ. Whether the pilot heard her through the intermittent static or simply saw her warning gestures, the helicopter abruptly changed course, hovering about 50 meters above the landing zone. Through the open door, Mia could see Parker's confused expression as he tried to understand what was happening. Using hand signals from their shared tactical training, Mia indicated danger on the ground and directed the pilot to an alternative landing site, a flat area about 200 meters to the north that hadn't been part of the original training facility. If Alan had set traps, he would have focused on the areas most likely to be used based on standard protocols. The helicopter pilot understood, banking away toward the indicated location. Mia followed at a run, scanning the ground ahead for any signs of disturbance or hidden devices. The alternative landing zone appeared untouched, with no indication of recent human activity. One by one, she neutralized each triggering mechanism, working not according to standard procedures but with the innovative approach that had made her legendary within Phoenix team. Where Alan expected her to cut certain wires, she bypassed them entirely. Where he anticipated a specific tool, she used an unconventional alternative. The final trigger was the most challenging, a collapsing circuit designed to detonate if power was interrupted in any way. Alan had created it as a perfect trap, incorporating countermeasures for every standard approach. Outside, she could hear the arrival of vehicles. The diplomatic convoy had reached the governor's residence despite efforts to divert it. Time had run out. With absolute focus, Mia made her final approach. Instead of attempting to disconnect the power source as protocol would dictate, she introduced a parallel circuit of her own design, a technique she had developed but never taught, not even to her most promising students. The secondary circuit maintained power flow even as she carefully disabled the primary, preventing the collapse that would trigger detonation. It was precision work at the highest level, requiring the steady hands and absolute concentration that had defined her career. "Circuit stabilized," she whispered to herself as the last connection was secured. "Triggering mechanisms neutralized. Device disarmed." She carefully extracted the explosive component, enough C4 to bring down the entire building and everyone in it, and secured it in her specialized containment bag. Only then did she allow herself a deep, shuddering breath as the tension of the past hours began to dissipate. The door burst open behind her, security forces rushing in with weapons ready, followed by a familiar face, Lieutenant Allen, wearing the uniform of a diplomatic security officer. Their eyes met across the room, mutual recognition immediate and absolute. In his expression, Mia saw first surprise, then bitter acknowledgement as he realized his plan had failed. "Phoenix," he said quietly, his hand moving subtly toward his sidearm. "It's over, James," Mia replied, remaining perfectly still on the chair beneath the chandelier. "I've disarmed the device." "How did you know?" The question contained genuine curiosity beneath the anger. "How did you find it so quickly?" "Because I taught you," Mia said simply. "Everything you know about placement, about trigger design, about maximum effect, it all came from my training." "Did you really think I wouldn't recognize my own lessons?" Security forces moved to surround Allen, unaware of his true identity but responding to the tension between him and Mia. With calm professionalism, she descended from the chair, still holding the containment bag. "Lieutenant James Allen," she announced clearly, "is the bomb maker responsible for the recent attacks on EOD teams across the region. He should be considered extremely dangerous." Allen's expression hardened as the security team moved in. For a moment, Mia thought he might attempt something desperate. But instead, a strange calm seemed to settle over him. "You always were the best," he said quietly. "That's why it had to be you who tried to stop me. No one else would have figured it out in time." As the security forces took him into custody, Mia felt no triumph, only a profound weariness mingled with relief. Another Phoenix operator lost. Not to death this time, but to something perhaps worse. The corruption of everything they had trained for, everything they had stood for. 3 days later, Mia stood on the tarmac at Bagram Air Base, watching a transport aircraft prepare for departure. Major Jameson approached, offering a cup of coffee that Mia accepted gratefully. "The final report came in," Jameson said. "Allen's device at the training facility was exactly as Sinclair described. Sophisticated, but ultimately designed as a diversion rather than for maximum casualties." "And Sinclair?" Mia asked quietly. Jameson's expression softened. "Still no trace. The search teams found evidence that he escaped the building before the explosion, but nothing since. It's like he just disappeared." "That's what he does," Mia replied with a faint smile. "Appears when needed, vanishes when the job is done. Will you look for him?" Mia considered the question, watching the bustling activity of the airfield. "No. If he wants to be found, he knows where I am." Later that evening, as she packed her equipment for return to her regular assignment, Mia found a small, folded note tucked into her canvas tool bag. The handwriting was instantly recognizable. "The best teachers don't create followers, they create new leaders who surpass them. You did exactly that with Allen. His corruption doesn't diminish your achievement. Remember that as you build your new team." Enclosed with the note was a small metal pin bearing the Phoenix symbol, not the militarized version used in their operations, but an older, more elegant design representing rebirth and renewal. 6 months later, Captain Mia Reed stood before a classroom of young EOD specialists at the newly established Technical Operations Academy. The facility had been created at General Morrison's direction, designed specifically to bridge the gap between equipment management and field operations. "The first thing you need to understand," Mia began, surveying the eager faces before her, is that equipment is never just equipment. Every tool you calibrate, every system you maintain, every protocol you follow, they're all part of a larger mission to save lives. She moved to the training table where a complex device had been assembled, a teaching model based on one of Alan's designs, with all explosive components removed. The second thing you need to understand is that no protocol is perfect. The enemy adapts, technology evolves, and situations change. Your greatest strength as specialists isn't in following procedures. It's in knowing when and how to improvise beyond them. Among the students, she noticed a young woman in the back row, diligently taking notes in a worn leather notebook rather than the standard issue tablets everyone else used. Something in her focused concentration, her methodical approach, reminded Mia of herself years earlier. Technical expertise isn't just about maintaining equipment, Mia continued, making eye contact with each student. It's about understanding systems so completely that you can identify problems before they become catastrophic. It's about seeing patterns others miss. It's about valuing precision while remaining adaptable. She picked up a specialized micro tool, holding it where everyone could see. These tools can save lives, but only when guided by hands that understand both their capabilities and their limitations. Your job isn't just to master the tools, it's to know exactly when and how to use them. After the class, as students filed out to their next training session, the young woman with the notebook lingered behind. "Captain Reed," she said hesitantly, "I wanted to ask you something." "Go ahead, Specialist." "Torres, ma'am. Jessica Torres." The young woman straightened slightly. "I was wondering, how do you balance technical precision with the need to improvise? When do you know which one takes priority?" Mia studied Torres thoughtfully, recognizing in her the same drive, the same quest for excellence that had defined her own early career. "The technical precision gives you the foundation," she replied, choosing her words carefully. "It's what you fall back on when everything else fails. But the improvisation, that's what saves lives when the situation doesn't match what you trained for." She gestured toward Torres's notebook. "Write down every procedure, memorize every specification, master every protocol, then be prepared to throw the book away when the moment demands something different." Torres nodded, making a final note before closing her book. "Thank you, ma'am." As the young specialist left, Mia turned to the window overlooking the training grounds, where the next generation of technical specialists was learning not just how to follow procedures, but how to think beyond them. The phoenix pin Sinclair had left her was fastened to the collar of her uniform, a small personal reminder that expertise wasn't about avoiding mistakes or preventing failure. It was about rising from those experiences stronger, wiser, and more capable than before. The quiet equipment specialist who had once hidden her extraordinary skills had found her true purpose, not just in disarming bombs or managing tools, but in creating a new kind of specialist who understood that technical excellence and tactical innovation were two sides of the same coin.